This is George Washington. Welcome to my channel. And today we are going to look at the life story of one of America's most revered founding fathers and its first president, Mr. George Washington. Early life 1732 to 1752. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732 in Westmoreland County, Virginia, to Augustine and Mary Ball Washington. His father died when George was only 11 years old, leaving him to be raised by his mother. As a young man, he received a limited formal education, but taught himself surveying and became a surveyor. He began surveying land in Virginia, and this led him to explore much of Western Virginia. It was during this time that he explored and stayed at the site of the future capital city of Washington, D.C., which was called Tenallytown. At this point, it was just a small village consisting of about 100 people. But because George spent so much time there while surveying, it held a special place in his heart. French and Indian War 1754 to 1758. The British were fighting the French for control of North America. This war was part of the larger 7 Years' War being fought around the world. George Washington was commissioned as a major in the Virginia militia in 1753. He resigned his commission in 1758 after suffering from illness and hearing that his family estate was being run into debt. While in the military, he had become friends with several British officers, including General Edward Braddock, who would later be killed in a battle with the French and Indians near Pittsburgh. George Washington would later say that he learned more from that day than he ever did in a schoolhouse. Marriage and Plantation Life 1759-1774. In 1759, George Washington married Martha Dandridge Custis, a wealthy widow from New England. They did not have any children together, but he became stepfather to her 2 children. After their marriage, they lived on his family's Ferry Farm until he sold it and moved to Mount Vernon. Most of his income came from the labor of enslaved people on his plantation. By the mid-1770s, his plantation was producing enough food for his family, and the extra food could be sold for profit. Some of the crops he grew included wheat, barley, tobacco, corn, oats, and cotton. He also raised cattle, hogs, sheep, and horses. He even experimented with growing hemp, which had many uses at the time. And this would eventually lead to the invention of the cotton gin. Revolutionary leadership 1775 to 1783. When the American Revolutionary War began in 1775, George Washington was appointed commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. He played a key role in winning the war against the British and securing American independence. Although he wasn't very well liked by the soldiers at first because he didn't share their desire to fight against the British, he won them over with his leadership and bravery. One of his greatest achievements during the war was his victory at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781, which led to the surrender of British General Cornwallis and effectively ended the war. After the war, he was given the title of President of the United States in 1783. The newly formed United States had a weak central government under the Articles of Confederation, and as President of the Constitutional Convention, Washington helped draft the United States Constitution, which created a new strong central government. Presidency 1789 to 1797. In 1789, George Washington became the first president of the United States. During his presidency, he dealt with many challenges, including establishing a new government, setting precedents for the office of the president, and resolving conflicts with foreign powers. Despite these challenges, Washington set the standard for the office of the president and established many precedents that were followed by future presidents. He also helped to maintain neutrality during the French Revolution, which pleased both sides of the political spectrum. In 1796, he decided not to run for a 3rd term and retired to his plantation at Mount Vernon, slavery paradox. While slavery was abolished in the northern states after the American Revolution, Washington continued to own slaves throughout his life. He inherited slaves when he married Martha, and he continued to buy and sell slaves to help pay for his debts after the Revolutionary War. However, he did begin to question the morality of slavery as he grew older. After his wife Martha died in 1789, he wrote in his will that all of his slaves were to be freed after his death. This resulted in 123 slaves being freed. However, the Washington estate at the time was being run by his nephew, Bushrod Washington, who kept some of the slaves to work the land. So it appears that George Washington may not have been completely successful in abolishing slavery on his own plantation. Farewell Address. In 1796, George Washington gave his famous farewell address to the nation. In it, he warned against political parties and warned the nation to avoid permanent alliances with foreign countries. He stated that such alliances would tend to involve us in the conflicts of other nations and drain our resources. He also warned against sectionalism, stating that it was destructive to the unity and strength of the nation. Finally, he urged the American people to remain united and to keep the peace, stating that it was the greatest blessing which could be enjoyed by any nation. His farewell address helped to set the tone for the nation during the first decades of its existence. Final years 1797 to 1799. In 1797, George Washington left public life and returned to his beloved Mount Vernon. Here he could enjoy his property and spend time with his family and friends. Unfortunately, his health began to deteriorate rapidly, and in December of 1799, he came down with a throat infection and ultimately died. He was buried on the grounds of Mount Vernon next to his wife, Martha. At the time of his death, there were no national monuments or statues dedicated to him. However, after his death, Americans began to revere him as a national hero. Over the years, many statues and monuments have been built in his honor. Legacy. George Washington is considered to be the father of his country. He was the leader of the nation during its most formative years, and his decisions helped to shape the course of American history. He was a key figure in the American Revolution and the Constitutional Convention, and as the first president of the United States, he established many precedents for the office. He is remembered as a man of integrity, courage, and leadership. His legacy continues to inspire Americans today, and he remains one of the most respected figures in American history. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below. Thank you for watching.